I'm Dr. Jianing Chen from BNU HKBU UIC. Welcome back to my course of Studies of Contemporary Chinese Linguistics. This is the last chapter, Dialectology. Okay, here's the outline of this chapter. I'm going to talk about the dialect, sociolect, standard language, and some other related terms. And then I'll talk about linguistic distance and a Chinese counterpart of the term of a dialect, 方言. Also, I'll talk about Chinese language and dialects using some maps, especially focusing on Putonghua and other dialects. Then, I'll mention the classification of Chinese dialects, give you some examples. And finally, I'll talk about the phonological, lexical, and grammatical characteristics of some major dialects of Chinese language. Okay, let's start from the definition of dialect. Dialect can be defined as a variety of a language of a particular group of speakers. The dialects or varieties of a particular language are closely related and are most often largely mutually intelligible, means can understand each other, especially if they geographically close to one another in a dialect continuum, lived close to each other. And it applies most often to regional speech patterns, but a dialect may also be defined as other factors. For example, a social class, as we discussed the social dialect last time, or ethnicity. Okay, let's first distinguish among those related terms, including sociolect, ethnolect, and regiolect. Sociolect is a dialect associated with a particular social class or group of people, while ethnolect is a dialect associated with a particular ethnic group. And terms like regiolect or regionolect or geolect or topolect can be used interchangeably. They all mean a geographical or regional dialect, and any variety of a given language can be classified as a dialect. Here, I'm using this broad sense, including any standardized varieties. For example, even Putonghua in practical use is also a form of a dialect. Okay, let's distinguish from standard language and non-standard, so-called non-standard dialect. The distinction between the standard language and the non-standard, usually vernacular dialects of the same language is based on social, political, cultural, and historical considerations, or prevalence or prominence. So, in other words, in most cases, it's not defined by the language itself, but by some other factors, especially the political factors. In the definition and differentiation among language and dialect can be explained in this way. They may overlap and are often subject to debate, with the differentiation between the two classifications often grounded in arbitrary or social political motives. That means dialect can mean non-standard variety of a language, while a lingua franca is a standardized one. Features that distinguish dialects from each other can be found in lexicon, vocabulary or grammar, morphology or syntax, and pronunciation, that of phonology. And here are some related terms, including the subdialect, which refers to a regional subvariety of a more widely spoken dialect. For example, Mandarin is a very big, very large dialect of Chinese language because it has so many population. So Mandarin is usually further divided into some other subdialects, including, for example, Northeast or Southwest Mandarin. And further, subdialects can be also divided into some accents. For example, it is a way of speaking typically of a particular group of people, and especially of the natives and residents of a region. Some local feature of a particular subdialect. So the difference among different accents typically appears in the form of a pronunciation. And even to the extreme, language or dialect can be furtherly divided into idiolect, which refers to the particular speech patterns used by an individual. For example, I speak in a particular way, I have my own feature, and my subdialect can be regarded as an idiolect of myself. And we can passingly discuss some other terms about language blending. We know that the formation of a dialect or subdialect is because of the change of the language, the division, while besides division, languages or dialects also affect each other. So, according to the definition of a Merriam-Webster dictionary, here's a term of a pidgin. Pidgin means a simplified speech used for communication between people with different languages. That means different languages can merge, can blend or interfere with each other. And if the language is used later on, the pidgin, that could become creole, which is a language that has evolved from a pidgin but serve as the native language of a speech community. So it is very important to understand these two terms because they are related to historical change of a language, similar to the situation of the forming and the development of dialects. And in the field of dialects, we can also use some terms, including the jargon, which refers to lexical difference concentrated in the specialized vocabulary of an organization. A particular group of people, they use a set of terms exclusively. And cryptolect or cants, there are some secret words, and also including slangs and argots, refers to the differences in vocabulary that are deliberately cultivated to exclude outsiders, used only by those people inside and make outsiders don't understand them. So we often use the term linguistic distance as a criteria to classify subsets of language as dialects. So the dialects of a language with a writing system will operate at different degree of distance from the standard written form. This is usually happened in the writing system of phonetics. And some dialects of the language are not mutually intelligible in spoken form, leading to the debate as to whether they are regiolects or separate language. For example, it is usually debatable, especially internationally, of the status of Cantonese, whether it can be regarded as a individual language or a dialect of Chinese. A dialect can be related or compared with the Chinese counterpart term fangyan. So the Chinese conception of the term dialect traditionally refers to the local form of speech, literally fangyan, regional speech. And it does not take the parameter of mutual intelligibility into consideration. That means fangyan speakers are not supposed to be able to understand each other of Chinese. while the Western term dialects usually apply this criterion as decisive, as a mutual intelligibility. And dialects of Chinese are phonologically as diverge from one another. They can be quite different as German from Dutch or French from Italian. In European languages, they are definitely different languages, but in the context of Chinese, such difference cannot distinguish language. They are all dialects of Chinese language. And let's talk about Chinese language and dialects. So the historical association of speakers of dialects has always been maintained for Chinese language by the following ways. For example, by the use of common writing system, which is very unique for the Chinese language, especially for the written aspects, and by the use of common classical idiom, 成语 or 惯用语, and based on common body of literature, read by all the literates in China, and also by the general use of a common modern Mandarin, which is the most commonly used dialects in China. And here's a quotation from Zhao Yuanren's work. There's a linguistic and political geographical sense in which one can speak of the Chinese language. So Chinese language here is defined not only by language itself, but also by political geographical sense. Okay, here's the map of languages in China. You can also check it out on this website. You can look for further information. We can notice that the yellow part is occupied by ethnic Han people. So the language of narrow-sensed Chinese language is used here. And this map is overlapped with this page, which is the ethnic minority distribution in China. We can notice that those regions lived by ethnic minority people speak their own language, but not Chinese language, not Hanyu here. Here is also a map showing the Chinese dialects of Hanyu, while including also other major minority languages, and with their percentage of population of the speakers. Here shows the major, single, very important language or dialect. It's Mandarin here. Has more than 60% of population speakers. And we have also mentioned the position or the status of Chinese language or the classification of it. So Chinese language, Hanyu here, is a sub-branch of a Sino-Tibetan language family. Other members of Sino-Tibetan families have a group language, while the Chinese language is unique in this branch, which is called Sinitic language. If you regard it as from a linguistic view, it refers to a group of East Asian analytic languages that consist a major branch of the Sino-Tibetan language families. And it's split between the Sinitic language and the rest of the family. For example, including Tibeto-Burma. And the Sinitic here refers to many varieties of Chinese unified by a shared historical background and also a shared writing system. So since China is a very big country and with many languages and dialects, so it is very necessary to have a lingua franca, as we mentioned in the first chapter. So the diversity of dialects of China needs to create a linguistic standard or national language. The term of the national language evolved in history from 雅言、通语、官话、国语 to 普通话. Nowadays, we sometimes call 普通话with 中文 or 华语. For example, 中文 is popular outside China, while 华语 is popular in Singapore. Whereas also a country to regard the 普通话 or 华文 as a standard language. 普通话 literally means common speech. As I mentioned, it's the official language of China and Singapore. China here includes Taiwan, and it has created on the basis of a northern dialects or Mandarin dialects, especially the accent, the pronunciation system of Beijing region.